Today's gonna be super practical. I'm taking a super long thrifted coat and turning it into a more practical coat with a hood. But I think you're gonna love how I made this hood from the bottom of that really long coat, added in a bit of hardware, and then finished off the shorter length coat with a beautiful hem treatment. Well, hello and welcome to Catherine Sews. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I'm upcycling a coat. Look at this awesome coat that I thrifted. This is so good. It's so good. I love the whole like big shoulders, kind of oversized coat. For Vancouver fall and winter, I need a hood. I much prefer to walk around with a hood rather than an umbrella. So this coat must have had a hood before because it's got buttons all around the back of the neck. I just need to make a hood. So luckily it's ginormously long. It's down to my ankles. It feels like I'm drowning in it. It feels like it's just disproportionate for me. I'm only 5'4". I can't wear a super long coat like this, but that's good news because that gives me a ton of fabric that I can work with that'll make this just the perfect fall coat for me. So it is a black on black project, which I know is always hard to see, but I'm going to do my best to get really good lighting on it so that you can hopefully see what I'm doing. So I think I'm ready to start with this one. And if you're ready to, then let's just jump right in. A few things I'll need to make the pattern is a hood to base my hood on. A Sharpie, but at home you would just use a sharp pencil. And then my sharp tracing wheel, my Variform hip curve, and my see-through ruler. This one angles back a bit away from that center front. I think I'll just bring mine out a little bit. And as I say, I can always trim it down later. Okay, so I'm gonna just dot that line. And then I'm gonna give myself like a little suggested point of where I probably wanna take that out to. And just to help you to be able to see, I'm gonna just trace that little seam and the neckline. So that's the basic shape of the main piece of the hood. I'll mark where that is coming out there and here. So I'll use my sharp tracing wheel, but it's just like sticking a pin through. And then here, I don't think I can really get through all those thicknesses. So I'm just going to put a little L shape right there and a little L shape right here. But as I say, I probably want to extend it out a bit more. Maybe one dot in the middle. Okay, so I've got dots here, there. And then to use this Variform, you just kind of try to find a place that it can help you smooth those dotted lines into one smooth line. I want a right angle here at the back neck, otherwise it'll be a point or a V. And about like that. Looks nice, right? And then this front line doesn't have to be a straight line. Probably want a right angle here. So all of this is just guesstimate at this point. And I think I'm guessing on the side of making it too big. So I'm gonna put my 1/2 inch line right on top of the line I've just drawn and kind of pivot my ruler around to draw my seam allowance. And the green line is more or less centered here. So I'll call this the side, and I'll need 2 of fabric and 2 of lining. Now, I'd like to get a measurement of that back edge. The measurement that I want is actually going to be the sewing line, so that inner line. And sometimes you can use your see-through ruler and bend it around like that to get a pretty good measurement. Good, so that's 18 inches long to this point, and then a little shy of 2 inches, 1 3/4. I want a strip that is 19 3/4 inch long, and the width of this panel here, 4 inches wide there. I'm just seeing if it's the same width the whole way. Oh, no, it flares out at the front. Oh, I kind of like that. At 2 inches away from the edge, it flares out and goes up to 5 inches. 19 3/4. Need the 1/2 inch seam allowance on both sides. And then we said the last 2 inches plus seam allowance. So really it would be the last 2.5 inches. I'm going to just eyeball that. 2.5 inches. It flares out an extra 1/2 inch on each side. You can ignore this whole line here. I've accidentally built in an extra 1/2 inch here, haven't I? I don't know what I was thinking there, but you know what? I'm going to keep it because I did say I'm going to start off with it bigger and scale down if I want to. So this is starting off bigger. Here we go. We're fine. So this is my rotary cutter that I saved for paper. So this is the hood center, and it's just cut 1. You know what? I'm just gonna go that extra 1/2 inch here too. That was an impulse. Now all that's left to do is actually cut into that beautiful coat. Your entire screen is black right now, except hopefully you can see this pin. This is in the side seam of the coat. When I had it on, I stuck a pin in at the length that I would like the finished coat to be. That means I have this much left, about 18 inches. So when I look inside the coat, the back panels are not interfaced, the front panels are. I don't really mind if my hood is interfaced or not, but I want both sides to be the same. I'm kind of being chicken. I want to just take exactly as much as I need and then cut. So 15 inches from the bottom. Okay, so I'll just mark 15 inches all the way across and cut. And yep, I'm cutting right through the lining. You know what? That first cut is always the scariest, right? I'm going to use my giant scissors for this. That's it. No turning back now. So now what I've got here is just the tiniest, goofiest little vent on the back. So I'm going to get rid of that. The vent is important when you have a super long coat. You need the walking room, but on the coat this length, I'm not going to need it. But at some point, I'm going to want to cut the lining at least 1 inch shorter. I'm going to come back to the main body in a little while. And now I can just deal with this part. That's easier. Now I've got one chance at this, right? If this doesn't work, or if I wish I'd made it bigger, there's no turning back. So I'm just going to see places where I might want to have just a little bit more room, and I can always trim down later. And that is me just being chicken. That's okay. Here we go. What I might do here is join these pieces first and then cut out my longer piece. I think I will do that. The lining is held together to the fabric with these nice strip of lining, and that's quite nice. I like that. I can duplicate that at the end. Right now though, I'm just going to chop it. There is a seam right here, and instead of opening it up, I'm just going to cut right beside it. And same with the lining, the seam is right here. And one more seam right there. No problem. So I'm going to join fabric to fabric and lining to lining. And then I can just press those seams open and flat. Oh, this is my new iron, by the way. My old iron died in the middle of that bridal alteration video. This is my new one. Fancy, right? Rowenta. I love it. Look at that steam. This is now sewn into a tube, which I'm glad of. The lining section is not long enough for the centerpiece, so I'll put the fabric part in the front of the hood that flares at the top. I think that's going to be logical. That'll be actually very good. How nice. So now the lining goes to the lining, and this is going to just pin around this whole curve. And it looks like it's going to fit. No problem. I might as well just make it in the lining first and then make sure I like it. If I do need to trim it down, I'll trim it down before I sew the outer hood. So I'm trying to ease in along the curve. Okay, that's actually pretty good. All right, let's go. I'm going to put the bigger side down. The part that I'm trying to ease in goes down so that those feed dogs help me to ease it in. If there's a lot of ease, I can kind of hold back on the top and the feed dogs grab the underlayer and help me to ease it in. Okay, no problem around that curve. That's pretty great. Okay, so there's the lining. That went well. The lining hood just looks fine. So I've pinned and I'm going to sew the outer hood as well. But I just wanted to show you one more little thing. If you're easing in a straight piece to a curve, you can just make little snips in the straight piece. And that can help you to ease that in because they fit together at the sewing line. It's the edge where we have a difference in the measurement. So snipping that can help a little bit. And again, it's the bigger side down. Well, I always want to feel that it's smooth, that I'm not sewing in any puckers, and you'll feel them. You'll feel little bumps in there. Now see this, that edge wants to come out. I definitely want to keep my edges together. So I'm sticking a hand underneath here, and I can slide that back. And then I'm holding back a little bit, like I'm not letting this top one go through as quickly as it wants to. I'm going to hold back a little, and you'll see those feed dogs helping me with that extra piece there. Well, I don't know if you could see that. I could feel it a little bit though, where the feed dogs just kind of take up the slack. And if you're not sure what I mean about feed dogs, that's these little teeth underneath. That's lovely. So no puckers. I'm going to go to the iron and press those seams open. I'll use the tailor's ham to press those seams nicely. Okay, so this hood, not there yet. So not only don't I like the flare, I think I actually want it to taper. This is the first time I've ever pinned anything on my own head. I think that makes a lot more sense to really just bring it in like that. Okay, I think otherwise the hood's pretty good. It sits okay around the neck. I think it's good. So I'll just make this change on the pattern. So the way I've pinned it is taking some off both sides. So just to simplify, I'll fold this one in half, and this is the amount I want to take off, like from the sewing line to the pin. Let's call that 7/8 of an inch. So from this point, I'm coming in 7/8 and just blending it back there. And in fact, I might as well just cut that right off there. And the only reason I'm making the change on the pattern is so that I have that if I ever want to make a hood again. And same with this one, I'll blend to about back here, 7/8. I'm going to draw that and then just make that blend a bit better with my hip curve. About like that will be good. Nice, okay. But for my actual sewing, yeah, I think I'm safe to just sew like that. That'll be good. So I'll just sew on those lines on the outer hood and of course on the lining as well. There. Okay, that'll do. And then I can just trim off the excess. And now if I want to be able to press those seams open, I just need to pull out this section of stitching. Okay, to the iron. All right, so I'm going to use a tailor's ham to press these seams open and flat. And I will put a link in the description to my new iron, and I'll also put a link to a clapper and a tailor's ham. But As always, it's best if your first choice is to shop local. If you have a sewing store in your area and you want them to survive, then definitely give them your business wherever you can. I know that that's not always possible. For me, it's not always possible either. So that's why I do provide an Amazon link, but we definitely want to support our local stores wherever possible. I'm just about ready to put the lining together with the hood, but I decided to put a drawstring in here. I find that putting bits of hardware onto a project like this can make it look so much more professional. So I checked at my local fabric store and unfortunately couldn't find anything at all like this. These are from Amazon, and so I'll put a link in the description. But at the fabric store, I did get 1 yard of the stretch cord, or maybe I got a meter, so that should be good. But for now, I just want a buttonhole here, and so that takes a little bit of figuring. I'll figure it on the back. I know I've got seam allowance at the bottom, seam allowance along this edge, maybe a little less. So I want the buttonhole to sit within a casing here. And I want it to be, let's say, within 2 inches of the bottom. So I'm going to say right there is where I want my buttonhole. So I'm going to put a pin at the bottom of it and a corresponding pin at the bottom of the other side. Oops, right there. All right, so just one quick buttonhole there. I'll take my buttonhole presser foot and put a tiny button in the back. And then I've just selected a plain buttonhole. Now I marked this on the wrong side, but I actually want to sew it on the right side because the buttonhole will look nicer. So I'll just transfer the pins over. And then I haven't interfaced this, and it probably does want a piece of interfacing underneath that buttonhole. So I'm just gonna lay a piece of interfacing behind and trim it off later. So I just wanna get that little pick of the pin into the window, and I'm straight here. Good, and then I can just snip that buttonhole open. I don't even need to snip the whole length because I just have to get my cord through. Okay, so now my 2 hood pieces can go together. So they'll go right side together and then just all the way around that front edge. So I'm matching corners and seams. I think I'm going to understitch that just to give myself a nice edge here. So I'll just push the seam allowance toward the lining. Okay, so that understitch is good. This gives such a nice edge, and the buttonhole is ready. So I will be sewing at about 1 inch here or 2.5 centimeters just to create that casing. But before I do that, because this hood is going to be detachable, right? This neck edge isn't going to be sewn into the garment. So I need to finish that off. I need to sew the whole hood from the inside and then flip it right side out. So I'll be sewing across that neck edge and just leaving a gap. I'll leave a gap in between the 2 seams here. So I'm just going to clip seam to seam. And here at the side where I've done that understitching, I want to push the seam allowance to the side that it's understitched to, which is always the lining. So I've just got it folded like that. And a nice tight little fold. I don't want any extra here. Okay, here we go. I'll just jump across. And this side too, the seam allowance folds toward the lining side. Awesome. I can trim those corners a little bit. And if my curve is very curvy, I should clip into it. You just want to make sure that when it turns right side out, that seam allowance is going to be able to spread out like that. So there's my little opening, and I can turn the whole hood through there, and then I'll be taking it to the iron. Press that bottom edge nice and flat, and I can use my chopstick to go right into the corners to get that to come out nice and pointy. Ooh, that's looking good, hey? Looking really good. Alrighty, so let's just go to the iron and press that bottom edge nice. And as I press it, I'll have the edges of the opening tucked in nicely, and then I'll just be able to sew close to that edge to close up the gap. Here at the iron, I kind of roll that back and then push the seam out so that the seam is nice and close to that bottom edge. And here at the opening, just tucking in those edges, put a bit of tension so that they come in nicely together. Roll back and push out. So nice. You can do a lot of shaping with your hands. Like, could you see before that that corner was kind of flinging out a little bit? And if I sort of shape it how I prefer it to look, and give it a steam. Very good. Now I'll do my top stitch for the casing. I'm going to sew across that bottom edge, and then I just need to do buttonholes so that it can attach to those buttons that are already on the coat. I've pinned all the way around the hood because these layers are slippery and I don't want to have any problems when I'm trying to top stitch for that casing. But the first thing I want to do is just sew right along this edge of the opening just to seal that up. So nice and close to that lining edge, and where I can tell that the lining isn't showing on the outside. And then that little bit of stitching on the outside is not going to bother anybody. Looking pretty good. Alrighty, now my top stitch though, I want to do from the outside. Hopefully I don't have any problems with shifting layers. I'm going to start in the middle. I don't want to back tack anywhere that's going to really show, so I'm going to start in the middle. At the bottom edge here, I'm not making a casing, I'm just sort of delineating where the buttonholes are going to go. So I'm just sewing this at 1/2 inch. Turn about there. Okay. So then I can see my buttonhole here. Hopefully you can see, and I don't want to sew too close to it. So my guideline here around the front edge of the hood will be the edge of the bobbin case. And here I am worried that because the bottom layer is slippery, I don't want to have this top layer bubbling. And so I'm going to keep a bit of tension on it. See here where the top layer is looser, right? That's why I want that tension so that my layers go through evenly. A walking foot would be great right here. Getting into some trouble here. This is what I was worried about. So in a case like this, you want the bigger side down so those feed dogs help you. I don't love to top stitch from the bottom. It's not ideal, but I think in this case I need to do a little flip here. So if I'm flipping, that means I'm starting at the middle again and coming around the other way. No problem. I turn here, oh, nailed it. Okay, right in the right spot. Keeping some tension here. And I'm aiming to connect right with that spot with a tiny back tack. That might just have to do. I'll give that a little press and see if I can get this to lay flat. Like it looks a little rumply at the moment, but we'll see if the iron can work some magic for me. Everything else looks good. I'm happy with this side. Oh, look at how good that side looks. Excellent. Here's my little rumply area. Not loving it too much. Better. See how that does. If this was wool, I'd have no problem right now, but it's not. The wool would just steam in and behave so nicely, but Well, you know what? That's pretty darn good. Okay, problem solved. Happy, happy. For the buttonholes at the bottom of the hood, among the extra buttons was one that's an extra one of these hood buttons. So that's nice and easy. So that'll go in the back of my buttonhole presser foot. Of course, there's one button right in the center back. Center to center is 4 inches and 4 inches. Okay, and there are 5 buttons. Okay. If I did 4 inches and 4 inches, that leaves me here. I think I'm going to have mine further apart. I'm going to have my buttons 5 inches apart. I might just have to move the buttons, that's all. I'm going to put the buttonholes where it's logical for my hood, and then if I need to move the buttons, that is easy. Okay, let's do it. Back to the buttonhole foot. I want to have this area sort of centered underneath my presser foot, like that. Okay, so these are all going to be opened up, and then I'll just button it onto the coat and see if I need to move any buttons. No big problem. Okay, yep, no problem. Just got to move 4 buttons. Of course, the center is still the center, but the other 4 buttons have to move. So I just marked their placement, and I'm just stitching that through the thick layers of seam allowance here. I don't really want the tick to show on the outside. Okay, so moving 4 buttons just like that. Alrighty, so that worked out great. The hood is attached with the 5 buttons. It sits really nicely. It's perfect when it's on as well. The collar still covers. So I'm happy with the hood. So the cord locks that I bought from Amazon are not the right thing, right? These are for cords to go through and back, like doubling back on themselves, which is not what I wanted. So I'm not going to link the package that I bought in the description. Now, so what I did instead, I had to run across town, actually across 2 towns, to my local fabric store, and I was finally able to find the kind of cord lock that I wanted. So it took 2 different fabric stores, but that is always best, right? If you have a store in your area and you want it to survive, you really do need to use it as much as you can rather than relying on Amazon. So for these ones, you squish it, you stick the string or the cord through. Then we're going to come through the cord end, tie our knot, kind of push that knot down to the end as much as we can. And then that little end covers the knot, and then this can lock this in place. So if it's super windy, I can squish that right in there to keep that nice and snug. That's exactly what I was hoping for. That's really going to be great. I know, like, for me, this fabric store is 45 minutes away from my house. That's an hour and a half driving, right? There and back. As much as I always want to support my local fabric stores, because we want them to survive, right? But sometimes it's just hard. So whenever possible, though, let's make that our first priority, buying from our local places. But I know it's not always possible, so I will try to find something like this that I can link to on Amazon for you. But these are perfect. That's just great. I love it. And I like the look of it, right? Like, that looks cool. You know, it doesn't look homemade. I'm really happy with that. That looks great. So I've gone ahead and opened out that back vent because it was only like 3 inches long. You can see right here why I'm not able to just raise that slit up. To get that vent, you need to have this excess fabric, which I just don't. So it's going to go. I'll be closing this up. So I'm aligning those edges, but I'm going to sew it right in that fold. And then the lining just sews straight, just like that. Okay, so I'll sew that, then I'll cut off the inch off the lining. And now I can safely trim off this excess. Good. And now I can cut an inch off the bottom of that lining. So then the lining, on the original was folded twice, just a small fold and then about an inch deep fold. And the original hem is serged and folded with about, an inch and a half deep fold. And these little strips were kind of tucked into both hems. So to make those little connecty strips, so I'll just tear a piece that's maybe an inch and a quarter wide. Maybe I'll get 2. Okay, I'm just going to run these over to the iron and fold them into 4s. So those are pressed in 4 with the raw edges in the middle. And now I'll just sew close to that edge so that everything's tucked in nice and neat. Just like that. Nice and neat. Those are fun. The lining is going to get a small fold and then a deeper fold. And I want these little lining connectors to be caught in there. So that means I can just sew it to the right side of the lining before I make those folds. So I'll do 1 at each side seam. They obviously don't need to be this long. This is just what I had, and I'll trim it off when I know how long I want it. I know I want 1 at the center back, so I'll take half of 1, which now that's going to bother me. So let's just cut them both in half. Good. Okay. So 1 at the center back. So I think I'm just going to start by turning a small fold, and I'm just going to sew that down. I think that'll make it easier to kind of break up this step into 2 separate steps. And then when I do the deeper fold, those tabs are just right in there. I need to turn this a full inch or 2.5 centimeters. Okay, so that's already, I'll give that a press. That'll look better. I'll serge the bottom edge of the outer coat. So before I serge this edge, I better remove a little bit of this edge stitch that's on both front edges. I think it'll give me a nicer corner if I get rid of that and then replace it after the hem. And if you don't have a serger, this would be a really nice time to use some hem tape where you sew the ribbon to this edge to finish off that raw edge. So at the iron, I went ahead and just pressed the lining. That looks good. The little tabs are set in there. And then while I was at the iron, I just pressed up an 1.5 inch deep hem on the outer coat. And I think I'm going to sew this just by hand. I definitely don't want to do a straight stitch that shows on the outside. And even a blind stitch, I think, would show a little bit. This fabric isn't super thick, especially on the back where it's not interfaced. So I think a hand-sewn hem will give me the best result. So just before I start my hand-sewn hem, I want to get these tabs in place here. So I'll have about an inch gap in between the 2 layers. I'm just going to do a little back stitch, just attaching the tab to the bottom edge of the hem. So the idea of these is to keep the lining in the coat together, but not rigidly. There's still some room for movement between the 2 layers. Okay, so for each of these little joins, I'm just opening it out like that so I can get inside there. And it's just a little backtacking it to the serging on the hem. Good. And then I can cut off the extra. So all 3 like that. Couple of things I need to do before I start that hand-sewn hem. And one is to make sure that this is sitting perfectly at the front here. It's actually pretty much bang on there, so that's not a worry, but it's good to check. I need to just do a little bit more machine sewing right here at both ends. So do you see how on the original one, the lining is sewn nicely into that little fold there? So to do that, I want to bring the hem back on itself. So the lining is going against the coat like this, right? That's just right sides together, no big deal. Now the hem folds back on itself, and then I can just sew right there, and then you get that nice, neat little corner, just like that. So that's inside here, right? We're just right side together here, and then the hem of the coat folds back right side together. So the lining just gets sandwiched in between the layers of the coat hem, and then it's just a matter of a straight stitch right there. So I just ran and did that little straight stitch there, and now when you turn that out, then the lining is so nicely caught in there. That just looks great. Okay, fantastic. Love it. Okay, the hand-sewn hem. With a single thread through my needle, I'm going to hide my knot underneath the serging and dig in wherever I can. And even on the interfaced section, it's going to be fairly easy. I don't have to worry too much. Oh, yes, I do. Okay, so a little pick in there so that I don't see anything on the outside. So I'm just getting that little pick and then right back under the serging. The interfaced section is a little bit more forgiving, right? And you just don't see anything. I know it's black on black, but you can't see anything on the outside. And as I encounter that first little connecting bit there, I'm just going to sew right through just as if it's not there. And then, now that I'm off the interfaced section, I need to be a little more careful. So just pick up 1 or 2 threads in that outer fabric and then right back behind the serging again, just like that. And the stitches are probably 1/2 inch, 1 centimeter apart. And you don't pull your thread too tight because you don't want to have the little pick show on the outside. So no problem, it's just a beautiful hem, doesn't show at all, nicely secured to the lining. So I will go sit at the kitchen table and finish this hem and be right back. The last little tiny thing is just a few hand stitches to sort of hold that facing down against the hem. So I'll hide my knot inside here, and I'm using a double thread to just pick up little stitches like that. Again, I want to make sure my stitches don't go all the way through to the outside. This finger is behind so that if I feel that needle poking out, I know I've gone too far. Sorry, I said that was the last little thing. It was almost the little. That's the thing about coats, is sometimes the finishing just takes forever. The absolute last little thing, other than pressing, is just to replace that edge stitch right there. Okay, right there. That keeps that corner nice. Okay, looking good. And you know what that means? It means we are done. So this jacket is no longer practically grazing the sidewalk. It's a really good, comfortable length for walking around town, for driving, for riding on public transit. Like, it's just a lot more practical. The hood is key in a Vancouver fall and winter. I love having a hood. And so this went together really, really nicely. I love that little bit of hardware on there. That really adds a nice little touch. And then a little bit of color is always nice. I'll be able to handle whatever a Canadian fall or winter throws my way. That does it for a very practical upcycle. I hope you enjoyed that one. I know I'm going to really get so much use out of this. I love it. And so I hope that was inspiring for you as well for your outerwear for this coming fall and winter. So until next time on Catherine Sews, you take care.